Hi everyone, Yasas que kalasirtate to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. Today we're going to be making a beautiful dessert. We're going to make Italian cream cake, which is actually not even Italian. It's a southern classic cake made of toasted pecans, coconut. The cake is moist and tender, and then it's filled and iced with a cream cheese frosting. It's to die for. It's beautiful, yet it's so easy to put together. Let's get started. So we're going to begin by making the cake. Okay, so we're going to begin with the dry ingredients that are in this bowl. I have 2 cups of all-purpose flour, or 285 grams, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, which weighs 3 grams, a teaspoon of baking soda, which weighs 5 grams, and a half teaspoon of salt. I'm going to go ahead and whisk that all together and set it aside. And then I'm going to toast some pecans. I have 1 cup of pecans that weighs 115 grams. I'm going to roast these in a 350-degree oven for about 5 to 7 minutes until they're nice and toasted. And once they cool a little bit, I'm going to pulse them in a food processor until they're finely chopped and set those aside. And I'm going to combine them with 1 cup of sweetened shredded coconut. That's about 120 grams. Mix that all up in a bowl and set that aside so it's ready to go. In my mixer here, I have 6 ounces or 1.5 sticks. Each stick of butter is 4 ounces, which weighs 113 grams. And it's really nice and soft and at room temperature. In the mixer, it goes with 2 cups or 450 grams of granulated sugar, 2 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract, and 1 teaspoon of pure almond extract. I have my whisk attachment on the mixer, and I'm just gonna whisk this up until everything is nice and smooth and incorporated. I'm also adding 1/4 cup of light olive oil just to keep the cake nice and moist. You're gonna get the moisture from the olive oil and the flavor from the butter. So that's why I add both of those. Whisk that all up until it's nice and fluffy. I like to mix it for about 3 minutes on high speed. Once that's ready, I'm going to add 4 eggs that are at room temperature. I'm just going to add them 1 at a time. Next, I'm going to put the mixer on low and I'm going to add the dry ingredients in a few batches. Once each batch is incorporated, I'm going to add the next until all of the flour is in there. And then I'm going to whisk together some yogurt and milk. I have 1/2 cup of Greek yogurt, 1/2 cup of whole milk. I'm going to whisk that all up. Usually, Italian cream cakes are made with buttermilk, but I don't buy buttermilk as part of my groceries. So the yogurt and milk is a good substitute that's going to keep the cake nice and moist and also add a little bit of tang from the yogurt. But if you have buttermilk, you could go ahead and use 1 cup of that instead of the yogurt and milk. Once the flour mixture is incorporated, you're going to go ahead and add the yogurt and milk mixture until that's incorporated. And then we're going to add the coconut and pecans until all of that is incorporated. Take the mixing bowl off of the mixer and with a spatula, go in there and just mix everything nicely so everything is evenly incorporated. A lot of times you're going to get butter and sugar stuck to the bottom of the bowl and you want the batter to be nice and smooth. So over here I have 3 8-inch round pans that I've just greased with some melted butter. I used the wrapper from the butter and then I lined the pans with some parchment paper, and I also sprayed it with some baking spray, which I didn't record, but that's just going to ensure that the cakes come out cleanly from the pan. I'm going to go ahead and distribute the batter evenly, and I like to do this using an ice cream scoop. If you want to take out a scale and do this, you can do it with a scale, whatever your heart desires, do it that way. Just make sure that the cakes are nice and even. Tap the cake so that way they're in an even layer. Okay, my oven is preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. These are going to bake on the center rack for about between 27 to 30 minutes. Keep an eye on them. And if you're putting them in like I am and some are in the back and then there's one in the front, you can rotate the pans halfway through so that way they bake evenly. Once a toothpick that's inserted into the center of the cake comes out either clean or with a few moist crumbs attached, it's ready. As soon as the cakes come out of the oven, you should run a knife around the edges of the cake to release it from the pan and then set it aside until it cools completely or at least comes to room temperature. Now, if you didn't already know this, you can make cake layers like these and freeze them, and they will keep fresh in the freezer for at least a month, but you're going to want to wrap them tightly. So once they cool down, you can just wrap them with plastic wrap, 2 or 3 layers, so that way they don't absorb any freezer odors, and then you can store them in your freezer, like I said, for 1 month, 1.5 months, or even at least a couple of weeks. So that way, if you know you're making this cake for a party, you can do this step first, a week ahead of time, a couple of days ahead of time, if you're really organized, a month ahead of time, and then you just basically assemble the cake. But if you're making it the same day, then make sure you let the layers cool completely before you assemble the cake. Because if you try to put frosting on warm cake, you don't want to know what happens. They're going to start slipping, the icing is going to melt, and you'll have a mess on your hands. So we're going to let these cool, then we're going to assemble the cake. Okay, so now it's time to make the filling and the frosting, which is essentially the same thing. So in my mixing bowl, I'm going to add 8 ounces or half a pound of unsalted butter that's nice and soft. I'm also going to add 1 pound or 455 grams of cream cheese that's also really nice and soft and at room temperature. I'm going to whisk it up. I have the whisk attachment on my stand mixer over here, and I'm just going to whisk it up to cream it all together. Then I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract and half a teaspoon of almond extract and whisk that up a little bit, and 8 cups or 2 pounds of confectioner sugar. And then we're going to whisk that up, beginning on a slow speed so you don't end up wearing the powdered sugar. And then once the sugar is incorporated, increase the speed to a high and just let it mix for about 3 to 4 minutes or until the cream cheese icing is really nice and fluffy. Then we're going to set it aside and we're going to assemble the cake. So at the bakery, we would assemble this on a cake board, so it's easy to move the cake around, but at home, I'm going to do it on my cake stand over here because that's probably what most people have at home. So on my cake stand over here, I'm just going to add one of the layers of the cake, and I'm going to peel the parchment paper off and just discard the parchment paper. If you want thinner layers, you can definitely trim the cake layers with a serrated knife. It is going to become messy if you do that. That's why I'm leaving it as a really nice hearty cake, and I'm just going to put the layers on there nice and thick just the way they are. I'm going to spread some of the filling over that first layer, and then I'm going to top it with the second layer, do the same thing, spread filling on top, top it with the third layer, add the filling or the frosting, and then I'm going to carefully frost the cake on top and all around. If your butter and cream cheese were really, really soft, mine were out for hours because I've been recording all day today, so the icing is super soft and it just spreads really easily. It just depends, again, on the temperature of your butter and the sugar. If the butter and cream cheese were a little bit on the cooler side, it is going to be thicker. So this is called the crumb coating. So we're just going to spread the icing all around the cake, and then I'm going to put it in the freezer for about 15 or 20 minutes so that way it can set. I'm also going to take my icing and put a little bit in this pastry bag that's fitted with the open star attachment. I'm going to put this in the fridge for a little while because it is a little thin and it needs to set a little bit. And in this quarter sheet baking pan over here, I've toasted some shredded sweetened coconut, a cup of it. We're not going to use all of this to garnish the cake, but you do need more than what's actually going to stick on the cake, just so that way you have enough to put on it. And you'll see what I'm talking about when we're going to garnish the cake later on. I just put the coconut on an even layer and I toasted it for about 7 to 10 minutes at 350 degrees until it began to turn golden. And I did the same thing with my pecans. I have a cup of pecans that I toasted, and then I just chopped them up in a food processor until they were finely ground. I'm going to combine the two together and leave them here, and we're going to garnish the cake with these. So once the cake comes out of the freezer, you can chill it. Now you can do this step a week ahead of time, even a month ahead of time. I mean, it's up to you, but you want it in the freezer for a minimum of 20 minutes. 20 minutes to an hour is perfect. Take it out, and now we're going to put the final coat of frosting on the cake. Just whatever your level is of cake decorating, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect because the sides are going to get covered in that toasted coconut and pecan mixture that we created a little while ago. Just go ahead and ice the cake all around, and then you're going to take a handful at a time, keeping the tray underneath so that way all of the nuts and coconut can fall back into the tray and you have a not so big of a mess afterwards. And just go ahead and stick it all around the sides of the cake. It's up to you if you want to go halfway up or all the way up. I'm just going to go all the way up with this, and then I'm going to pipe little rosettes on top of the cream cheese frosting, and I'm going to sprinkle the tops of the rosettes with a little bit more of that toasted pecan and coconut. I'm going to put this back in the freezer for another 20-30 minutes, and then we're going to slice into it. And just like that, you have this beautiful cake to serve to your guests. So this is beautiful if you're hosting a party or if you want to bring dessert to a party. Everybody's going to love this cake. It's absolutely to die for. Let's do the taste test. Oh my goodness. If you like carrot cake, you're going to love this. The cake is just so tender and buttery and flavorful. You have the pecans in there. The toasted coconut on the outside gets a little bit crispy, so it just adds another texture and another layer of flavor. That cream cheese icing is probably the best thing on the planet. You guys are gonna love this one. If you have any leftover, you can slice it up, put it on a sheet pan. Once the slices are frozen, put them in freezer safe bags, and then you can enjoy it with coffee throughout the week. If you want to get the exact measurements for this cake, they're on the website, dimitrasdishes.com. You're gonna have some leftover pecans and coconut. Put them in a little container and sprinkle them over your yogurt, your ice cream, or even your oatmeal. It's so good. I hope you guys enjoy this recipe. If you make it, let me know how it turns out in the comments section down below. And if you have any recipe requests, post them down also. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I'll see you all next time. Gracias.